Revenue Alternative Ad Hoc Committee meeting to order for Monday, April 22nd, 2024. Will be a hybrid format of participation, both in person at the administrative offices at 1201 East 7th Avenue, Florida Conference Room, and via communication media technology. If everybody would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. We do not have an in-person quorum, unfortunately. So I guess we could dispense with roll call because there's two committee members, myself and Mr. Mechanic. Thank you, David, for joining. With no quorum, we cannot approve the minutes from the last meeting on the 29th and the Joint Strategic Planning and External Relations Alternative Revenues Ad Hoc Committee meeting from March 18th. So we should probably just move into any public comment. I don't see any public here, so we can dispense with that and move into the discussion item, which is the development of the presentation for the full board of directors. If I could offer a couple of comments before I turn this over to Justin. We've been working on this now for about 6 months, and I know the staff's been doing most of the legwork on it, to which we are very grateful and appreciative. But this is the culmination of that as to what and how to present to the board on what we see as our potential additional new replacement revenues that will be available to us in both the near term and in the long term. So having said that, Mr. Willits, you are up, sir.
All right, thanks so much. Justin Willits, Director of Planning and Scheduling. Good morning, everyone. I've had the distinct pleasure of organizing a bunch of the data that has been requested through this committee to date. There's a lot in this presentation that has been seen before, especially by this committee, so I will go through it relatively quickly, and then depending on what our next steps are, this will probably be refined and shortened based on the chair's discretion, but I wouldn't think that this entire presentation would be moved, but we can figure that out at a later date. But there's a lot in here. It's a lot of slides, but I'm not going to spend 5 minutes on each one, I assure you.
Email for you.
So the agenda is, sorry, the delay here on the clicker is always fun. So the agenda is a current budget review, some existing revenue and peer comparisons, existing funding summary for capital and operating, future funding potential, and charter considerations and legal clarifications as it relates to the full board discussion. Shown here is the fiscal year 24 budget with the majority of our revenue generated by the ad valorem half-mil assessment on property taxes in Hillsborough County, followed by federal and state operating grants, past revenue, advertising income, and other minor revenue items. So based on the FDOT study, we did some peer comparisons for the local revenue generated per capita within Hillsborough County compared to our peers, and as shown here, out of all those peers, we are the lowest, just behind Central Florida, notably behind PSTA at $61. We are at 35 and change. PSTA does have 3/4 of a mil compared to our half mil. They're about 1.1 million people, and we are 1.5 roughly in Hillsborough County, 1.5 million. So next, we'll get into the funding summary and financial scenarios for various revenue options, or the existing picture, I should say. The capital revenue is one of our biggest needs. Currently, our formula funds are the only source we have of recurring capital funding. The impact fees we get from the city and Hillsborough County are de minimis. We're working through some estimates with the city of Tampa for what could be generated by the CRA, but as it currently exists, just under $2.5 million in recurring capital funds. The capital budget needs are currently being driven by the heavy maintenance facility, vehicle replacements, and bus stop infrastructure, bus transit infrastructure, BTI, as we commonly refer to it. We have some pretty conservative assumptions for competitive grants for the major items, particularly the heavy maintenance facility. And this is kind of all in the context of the update of our financial planning within the FDOT governance and operational analysis, finding of our status being significantly underfunded compared to our peers, and identifying the heavy maintenance facility as insufficient to serve the needs of the organization now and into the future. So the baseline service is returning to a pre-COVID service level, which is about 30 more revenue vehicles in service every day. An increase in service hours and really getting the majority of our service back to 30 minutes or better. It was about 2/3 of our routes were 30 minutes or better before COVID, and right now we're just shy of 50%. And then the unfunded service is based on the recommended or the needed budget compared to our peers of over $200 million a year compared to our approximately $100 million total operating budget. So to reach the pre-COVID service levels, we've identified our capital needs as $100 million for the heavy maintenance facility and a $20 million annual capital budget for vehicle replacements and bus stop improvements and shelters. That would include about 600 shelters and 300 ADA improvements. To transition that to the FDOT study findings of about a $200 million operating budget that is needed, the increase annually would go from 20 to 40 million based on the vehicle replacements being increased to reach that level of service. The 100 million remains the same because that is what we need for the heavy maintenance facility. That's the primary difference between those two scenarios. So again, stated side by side, the need for the existing service to return to pre-COVID levels would be a $100 million commitment at $20 million a year. And then if we were funded adequately, as stated by the FDOT study, that increase would be to $40 million a year for those vehicle replacements and other revenue vehicles. So now we'll transition into some service area information, operational funding, summary, and different financial scenarios. The level of service that we reference is the 2017 corresponds to pre-Mission Max, which was a major service change implemented in 2017 and 2018. And the 2020 service levels reference the pre-COVID service levels. So in 2017, the pre-Mission Max, the difference between what is on the street today, there were additional local routes across the network in both the city and the county, so a better service coverage. And there was more county service, both local and express. The pre-COVID service levels in 2020 really corresponded to more frequent service on our major corridors, but also in the city and unincorporated county, but also several different additional express routes that have since been terminated. Again, the highlights: better frequency in the city and the county, and better coverage in the county. And those service levels correspond to this table, which really shows the number of peak vehicles associated with each service. In 2017, pre-Mission Max, 153 peak vehicles. In 2020, pre-COVID, 132 peak vehicles, compared to our current pullout of peak vehicles, which is 101. In the bottom of this slide, you can see what it would cost to get back to those service levels. approximately 15 to 20 million to get back to pre-COVID or pre-mission max. And then there would be a recurring capital required each year from 2 to 4 million, depending on the scenario. And the total annual recurring funding would be 18 to 25 million, which would be the capital and operating annually to deliver those services. But the one-time capital vehicle expenditure to get back to that service level would be between 27 and 44 million, depending on the scenario. And those would be something that we would phase in over time. It's not like flipping a light switch. We'd have to phase that service in with vehicle purchases and increase over time. So some information on our service area breakdown. The ridership by jurisdiction. So the majority of our ridership is in the city of Tampa, about 57%, and the unincorporated county is 39%, and Temple Terrace at 3.2%. So the actual coverage of our service by the mile is mostly in the city, about 53%, and then followed by the county at 44%, and Temple Terrace by 2.3%. And then here's a snapshot of where our primary funding source, the ad valorem, the half mil, where that funding comes from. Majority, over 60%, comes from unincorporated county, and 37% from the city of Tampa, and about 2% from Temple Terrace. And here's a snapshot of, what the ad valorem is in the context of the other property taxes levied within Hillsborough County. So on the left, you'll see our half mil compared to the property taxes of unincorporated county, Temple Terrace, and the city of Tampa. Less than 3% of the total property taxes that are generated are allocated to HART. And then on the right side is an estimate of what the increased millage would generate if it was simply increase of the HART millage. So currently, a half mil generates $76.5 million. We budget at 95% of that, so that is the 72 million number I referenced earlier. An increase of that half mil to 3/4 of a mil would generate 114 million. An increase to 1 mil would generate over 150 million, and an increase to 1.5 mils would generate over 200 million. And just as broken out a little bit differently, but this is an estimate of what it would cost the average homeowner in each of our member jurisdictions, the unincorporated county, Tampa, and Temple Terrace. The average home price varies between each, the most expensive in Tampa, then followed by unincorporated county, and then Temple Terrace. After the general homestead exemption, we applied what an increase at each of those levels on the left side would cost a taxpayer in their property taxes based on those assumptions. And as you can see there, it ranges for a increase to 3/4 of a mil. The increase in property taxes would be from $50 to $84 on average. If it was doubling to 1 mil, it would increase from $100 to $168 annually. And if it was tripled to 1.5 mils, it would range from $200 to $336 annually. And even if it were the maximum of what is shown here, it would still be less than a 6% increase. If it were increased to 3/4 of a mil, for example, it would be a 1.3 or 1.4% increase to the average property owner in Hillsborough County in our 3-member jurisdictions. We were asked to get some information on how much a city-specific sales tax would generate, which is currently not legal in the state of Florida. No cities levy a sales tax. This would be a legislative action required. But based on, and the Department of Revenue does not split out sales tax estimates based on those jurisdictions because they are not collected by the city jurisdiction. So it's a number that can't be tracked down easily. I think it would warrant an independent study to come up with that exact number. So what we felt comfortable sharing was the previous countywide 1% sales tax estimate for the 2023 projection was $342 million. And absent an independent study, an assumption of 60% of that being produced in the city, generating around $200 annually seemed like a reasonable conservative estimate for the purposes of discussion in the absence of a formal study to determine what that number would be. And then I think I will pass it back to Commissioner Schisler.
Yeah, thank you, good job, thank you, Justin. To summarize, we're looking, hopefully, trying to get HART service back to two stages. One, pre-COVID level, and then two...
We can't hear, Gil.
Sorry, David. We're trying to maneuver revenues so that we can get HART back to pre-COVID levels to begin with, and then ultimately to pre-mission max levels, which dates back to 2017. And as Justin had indicated, that would be the funding requirements would be the $100 million for the heavy maintenance facility goes for either version. But then for pre-COVID, we require $20 million annual of capital revenues or capital expenses, and then for pre-mission max, it'd be $40 million. As we see it, as we have discussed through the last 6 months, we had three options that were coming to the surface. One was community investment tax, CIT, to which we got a little bit from in the first go-around back in 25 years ago, but we were essentially cut out of that for this one. And then then there's the option of a sales tax to be levied strictly on a city or an incorporated city boundaries, which we've decided, which legal counsel has said we would require state statutory change. At this point, is that a true statement?
Let me clarify what we discussed earlier and make David as well aware of it. You're looking at a statute 163.570 that talks about the issue with increasing the millage as opposed to sales tax. And it's a little more clear than we were discussing, so I want to make sure you get this update. If you look at the statute, it says it's authorized to levy up to 3 mills with the approval of the county commission at a rate sufficient to produce the amount if such millage is approved by a majority of the members. Okay, so starting with in terms of the authorization, the county commission must authorize it at a specified amount, and it must be approved by at least a majority of the members. So for example, not to suggest this is the case, but if the county were to approve it and the city were to approve it and Temple Terrace were not to approve it, it could still be authorized. Now, there's a second provision, however, and this is subpart 2. And it says no tax authorized shall be levied unless the same may be approved by a majority of the electors of each county and city that's participating. We now think that means that if 2 of the 3 approve it, it's authorized. And if one entity does not approve it, it cannot be levied in that jurisdiction. That presents some complications, but we think it can nonetheless still be levied. We have to deal with the issue of what happens in the jurisdiction that doesn't approve it. And there's some issues in the charter that address that. But in any event, it is possible if the county commission, the Board of County Commissioners approves it in the first place. That's the hurdle you have to clear first. And then, obviously, the jurisdictions are going to have to approve putting it on the ballot because it has to be approved by a referendum. So it is possible. Contrary to what I said earlier, I think we've smoothed these two out. I think you can do a possibility of raising a millage but it's going to be limited to the jurisdictions that approve it, and that creates issues regarding some jurisdiction that does not, assuming we can get the Board of County Commissioners to approve it in the first place.
But this is talking about ad valorem, correct?
This is the millage, yes.
Okay. Now, what about,
Oh, sales tax is a matter of state law.
okay, so the state law would have to be amended in order to allow a city to charge a sales tax strictly for that purpose.
Well, there is a specific provision that we litigated with regard to the SERS tax, which is a sales tax. And there's a process by which you have to go through to get that approved, which we thought we did in the first place. Unfortunately, as you know, the Supreme Court thought differently, notwithstanding what the local court thought. So getting a sales tax approved, I think we'd be subject to the same process, the surtax process, because that's where they authorize that to be done. So you could go through that process again, and as you may recall, the ultimate authority that the Supreme Court provided was that it did not sufficiently defer the decision-making to the county commission. It could be done. We could pass a surtax if the county commission were inclined, but you would have to make sure there's greater control by the county commission and how those funds are allocated in order to comply with what the Florida State Supreme Court has said the requirements are. That may be convoluted. The point is, yes, you can have a sales tax, but it's under the provision we did the first time with the surtax.
Okay, however, if the Board of County Commissioners doesn't want the tax levied on unincorporated county, okay, how then would it come under the jurisdiction of the HART Board to be the allocator of the funds?
It wouldn't be. You're
Wouldn't
going to
be.
have to, the county commission has to be on board, or A, a sales tax won't happen, number one. And number two, if the county commission doesn't approve it, you cannot increase the millage under the authorization in the statute.
So a
Chapter
county
165.
commissioner, the county commissioner would have no
160.
basis or standing to say that they want it to be levied strictly against the city. They can't do that.
Well, they could participate in a process in which that's the eventuality, but they'd have to approve it to move forward.
And then even the allocation of the funds received afterwards, they would have to participate in that too.
There's a unclear process as to what happens. For example, if the city of Tampa approves an assessment and no one else does. But because the statute that allows the increase in the millage, Chapter 163, requires a majority of the members of the authority approve it. So it'd have to be the city and at least one other.
So the people that are demanding this don't understand, and this is something I didn't understand till I got into office. I went to the Florida League of Cities meeting, and the very first seminar I attended was the distinctions between a county and the city, and I had it all backwards. And I'm wondering if they have it backwards themselves.
I wouldn't know that, but I don't think there's an understanding of this process. There's an adequate understanding of this process. It's a little more complicated,
Yeah,
and it's
not
difficult
cut
to
and
follow.
dry.
Pardon?
It's not cut and dry.
No.
And it's the basis by which the institutions are created. One's created by the state, the other's created by the people, articles of incorporation.
There is nothing, however, that prevents the city of Tampa to decide that it wishes to contribute more funds to the authority or to work with HART to create value. For example, they would have to do so under their own budgeting process. There would be then an interlocal agreement. It would not go through the state statute, other than the fact that interlocal agreements are authorized by state statute. But the city of Tampa could, for example, decide it's going to create a corridor and spend funds to create that corridor and enter into an interlocal agreement with HART to make sure that that corridor is created in a way that fits the operational requirements of HART. But that's just the city acting on its own to use revenue it generates on its own processes and spend it on transit.
Could that be a citywide boundary-to-boundary type of MOU, or does it have, or in your mind, would it have to be a specific corridor? Or
No, it doesn't have to be a
route?
specific corridor. It just has to be something the city can spend its funds on. And I would suggest that, since I was city attorney for a while, I don't think the city would want to move forward without an interlocal agreement that makes it clear that the funds that they're providing are being used for the purposes they wish to have them used.
Sure, okay, all right, cool. Well, that leads into the third option we had then, is the increase in the ad valorem rates for the countywide,
So
which
can I ask
presents.
a clarifying question?
Yeah.
So you said that two of the three members of our charter currently could vote to increase their millage, and then it would have to be put on the ballot. So would the ability to put that on the ballot is still controlled by the Board of County Commissioners, though?
You're going to need Board of County approval in order to even start the process, according to the statute. So, yes, that's the first hurdle. Will the board authorize moving forward with this process? And then they got to decide whether they're going to put it on their ballot for a referendum or not. But it has to be approved by referendum, the sales tax, the assessment increase.
But if two of the three members did move to increase the millage and the county did not, the county would still have to approve those members having it on their ballot?
They have to approve the beginning of the process.
Okay.
So they would have to decide, we may not ultimately approve this within our jurisdiction, but we're not going to stand in the way of Temple Terrace and the city approving an increase in the millage.
Understood.
Okay. I have to regroup my thoughts. So as we stand now, those, unless somebody else has anything else, those, as I see it, the three options that we have as from this committee to take back to the board, unless somebody else has any other brainchild. David, do you have any comments, any thoughts on this? Mr. Mechanic?
No, I do not have anything to add.
Yeah, to me, it sounds rather daunting to do this, but I think we at least have to continue forward down the road, down this path to at least try. We owe it to the constituents, we owe it to our riders, we owe it to our employees, we owe it to the entire process to keep moving forward with this. But again, as I said before at the last board meeting, this goes back to where the charter has to be reviewed before we can do anything. So everything hinges upon that. Have you heard from the chair if he's going to, okay. We still don't have the charter review group put together yet, so we have to,
One more slide.
yeah, oh, okay, I'm sorry. Justin?
There is one additional slide I did want to share. And depending on what the outcome and what we need to prepare at the staff level as far as background as the city goes, one of the bullets we prepared was a corridor-based assessment, as was referenced. And that's something we've been kind of working on at a staff level with the city of Tampa. So there's probably a little more work in the background to get an idea of what that could look like. So that's something that's going to be a longer-term thing that could be one of the products produced as part of this whole effort. But we are working on both what a city-specific millage increase could look like for HART, and we have some of those estimates. But a corridor-specific assessment, similar to what the streetcar does, is something that would be a layer of analysis and estimates that we need to still produce to inform this conversation down the road. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Okay, well, to your point, to that point, then, as Mr. Smith had indicated, regardless of where we go with this, or which avenue it has to start with BOCC. And any rate increases has to go through they're approving, not the rate increase, but the concept of it. And then we can do, which is going to take a while to get that on any kind of an agenda with them, because we still have to modify the charter to allow us to do anything.
I'd like to also clarify, I think one of the things that would be useful, my interpretation of the statute is based upon what I believe the text says. Now, surprisingly, sometimes other lawyers take different views.
Yeah.
One of the things that we could do is we could certainly talk to the county attorney's office and the city attorney's office and make sure we're all on the same page. But the county's going to be involved in this process one way or another. So
Sure.
I think it would be useful to make sure that we're providing consonant advice to that body. And I happen to know both the city attorney and the county attorney very well. I'm happy to reach out to them and see what their thoughts are in this process.
Unfortunately, I don't know how to put the cart in front of the horse or the horse in front of the cart, or what to do at this point. To me, I feel like I'm stumbling blindly in the dark, and I'm not sure which way to go. All I know is that we got to get the charter fixed first, okay? And then in the charter review, we can determine which way we want to go, hopefully, fix issues that are within the charter that we know that are there, maybe lay the groundwork, hopefully lay the groundwork for some kind of revenue enhancement opportunities moving forward. Never was going to happen in '24, maybe happen in '26, may have to wait to '28, I don't know. But in the meantime, if we don't get it started, it's never going to happen. So Justin, I liked the whole presentation, okay? You know, maybe there's a couple slides we could take out. I don't think there's anything we really need to add to it. For board presentation, I think it's sufficient for now, knowing that this particular chart that you have here, this particular slide, is keeps your foot in the door for saying, we need to do more analysis on that specific type of revenue enhancement, but because that's going to take, it's going to take a while to develop. Nobody's got a magic wand that's going to be able to calculate that real quickly, very easily.
Yeah, a lot of this different, these financial estimates have been worked on quite a bit since this committee was formed.
Right.
So it's not as far off as we suspect, and like council alluded to, some of these options could be solely in not the ad valorem increase countywide, right? That is the BOCC. But an assessment passed at the city council levels via an interlocal could happen without the county commission. So
But if
that's
we-
what I wanted to clarify, I
Yeah.
think.
If Tampa wanted to increase their millage,
It would not be the HART millage, it would be their own millage, and
Their
they could
millage,
allocate it to transit if
and
they
would be a
so
line
choose.
item in their budget. Is that
Correct.
what you're saying?
Basically.
Does that have to go through the BOCC?
No, that does not. One other thing for today, since you don't have a quorum, technically the committee can take no action. So the question is whether you want to move this forward to the board to get it on the agenda. Now, there would be no, quote, official committee recommendation, but it could be put on the agenda. The CEO has the authority to bring things forward to the board for consideration. And ultimately, the determination of the scope of the charter review is going to be a full board decision. You could, at this committee, have made a recommendation, but of course you can't because you don't have a quorum. So I don't know whether you want to wait and have another meeting to try to get a committee proposal, or whether you want to move forward and get this in front of the board. There is a lot of discussion, obviously, that's going to occur before this moves forward. But as I said, I'll be happy to talk to the county attorney and the city attorney about some of the things we've already talked about. There's no reason why some of these things can't be moving forward now, and apparently are.
Is that appropriate for you to do that unilaterally, or with just, you know?
It's appropriate for me to talk to them about understanding the law. I have no policy role here. It's inappropriate for me to suggest they raise their ad valorem taxes, but to make sure that they are understanding the process the same way we are understanding the process would be helpful, because as you no doubt are aware, this is going to be fraught with political considerations. I'd like to make sure the legal process is as clean and as clear as possible so that we minimize the complications.
You're going to have to do that regardless of whether we could make a decision now or not. I mean,
Yes.
Eventually, that discussion's going to have to happen.
Yes. That's why I'd recommend, I don't know that you need to authorize me to do that. I think that's something we should do as general counsel anyway. So I think, I'm just letting you know, we will do that. So you'll get the clarity that that will provide.
Mr. Drainville, your thoughts?
I feel like we definitely need all the information, and I think we need more input from other committee members. So we do have 2 weeks, I believe, before or at least a week and a half before we make a decision on getting it on the agenda, but I like to defer to other committee members before we actually make a decision on pushing this into the next board meeting.
Just to clarify, I believe what the CEO is indicating is that there would be some value in discussing this with various committee members. Obviously, he could not engage in a polling of the committee, so it would still not be official action of the committee, but it'd allow him to have more information on which to base his recommendation for the board review. And that's a perfectly legitimate and appropriate thing for the CEO to do, is basically one-on-one talk with board members and get their input. Again, he's not looking for seeking a vote, so it won't be official action of this committee unless that occurs at a committee meeting with a quorum.
Board members or committee members?
Well, committee members for committee action.
Okay.
But I don't know whether the CEO wishes to speak to beyond the committee.
Yeah, I agree.
I would think he would,
Yeah.
because this is such a critical issue. But I just wanted to make it clear that that's what he's saying, that he's not polling people, he's just getting input from his board.
That is correct.
Okay. I think that's as good a plan as action as we're going to come up with today with, David on the phone and me here and nobody else being present. I don't. Okay. We can beat this to death for another 45 minutes if we wanted to. Anybody else have any comments, any thoughts? Any other staff? Ms. Kirk, you got any comments?
No, Director, since I don't have anything to add, I think you and Scott said it best. We just move forward with, with the comments that you made, but I don't have anything to add.
David Mechanic, any closing comments? I don't know if you heard me.
No, sir.
Okay. All right. Moving forward then, since we can't come to any resolution on this, any old business? Any new business? Thank you, everyone. We stand adjourned. Appreciate it. I will, after Mr. Drainville has a chance to speak to the other committee members, if we could pull a meeting together before the next board meeting, otherwise it'll have to wait another month to move forward with this. But I would just, time is of the essence, but it's not. So but it isn't. So you go back and forth. It's just frustrating, that's all. Okay, thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon. Appreciate your efforts.